Welcome, everybody. Such a pleasure to be a part of the Berlin Metaverse. And thank you so much, YOONAVERSE team, for having me with you. And for our dear audience, I'm going to share the screen now. My name is Blake LEZENSKI. I'm the Partner Program Director at Outlier Ventures. And I'm here to talk to you about digital fashion and luxury, challenges on the road to mass adoption. So what we're going to cover today, I want to talk to you a bit about OV, the work we do at OV, and why it's relevant to the fashion vertical. Then we're going to deep dive into definitions of digital fashion and luxury. Then we will take a look at kind of challenges to mass adoption, both technical and those less technical. And finally, cover opportunities for both fashion brands and builders alike, technology builders. And maybe we might also have time for some bonus content, but let's see how we get on. So without further ado, let's dive in. So Outlier Ventures, what is it? Outlier Ventures originally started as an angel syndicate investing in crypto technology, but then as Web3 became more and more prevalent, we kind of grew and started investing on a venture scale. Around 2019, we found our core business model, which is the Basecamp program. It's a 12 weeks fully remote, fully virtual program in which we help a bunch of selected startups, a cohort from 5 to 10, to get to the next level, accelerate their growth, connect with our super wide network. And I'm happy to report since then, we became kind of the Y Combinator of Web3. Currently, we are the biggest Web3 investor by the volume of deals and the biggest Web3 accelerator. And we worked with some notable partners such as Farfetch, Walmart, and other crypto protocols working on different corners and aspects of Web3 and the open metaverse, which will become a relevant concept in today's conversation we're about to have. So with the Farfetch Group, we had the pleasure and the honor of running the Farfetch Dream Assembly Basecamp. This is kind of a snapshot of the second edition, where we selected 7 world-class teams that are tackling different issues around digital luxury and digital fashion, from making a distinction what's AI generated and what's not, and tracking the provenance of digital media, to community spaces, to kind of physical first retail models that enable Web3 technology, to tackling loyalty, to essentially providing commerce infrastructure to brands, to making those payments more sustainable through Web3, and finally to the creator economy around fashion and the creators that pertain to Web3, and how we manage those relationships through reinventing the CRM models. So of course, feel free to check them out independent of this conversation. And that cohort had a very warm reception from the market. A lot of fashion press covered that particular program, and that kind of fortified our position beyond our early investments in projects like Boson Protocol or brands like Ouroboros. Outlier Ventures kind of became the key investor in the world of digital fashion and luxury, and we still work on that and still look out for new partners and companies to work with. Currently, we are launching a Futureverse Basecamp with our amazing partner Futureverse. It's an organization that was instrumental in forming the Open Metaverse Alliance, and kind of on par with our core investing thesis, the Open Metaverse Operating System, which the whole idea is around making all of the virtual worlds interoperable together as one united spectrum. And it's very heavily focused on interoperability of those digital assets across gaming, other experiences, across the spectrum of digital realm. So, keep an eye out for the cohort announcement to know who we selected from a record-breaking number of applications and which companies are building as part of this program. And of course, check out the Futureverse ecosystem. So without further ado, before we move forward, I would love to provide some definitions we would use today. And these are by all means kind of my personal definitions. I'm sure there are other ways to define it. But what initially attracted me to the space is, now that we enter the era of digital fashion and digital luxury, how do we actually define what it is? Everybody uses those terms, but we still don't have a clear-cut established definition. So to me personally, digital fashion are means of identity expression that use the digital technology to extend the self-representation of an individual beyond the physical realm in the eye both of the individual and their audience. As we're about to kind of touch upon in that presentation, fashion never takes place in vacuum. Fashion takes place in a wider social setting where us as individuals, we express ourselves. And what is digital luxury? Well, in absence of such things as materials, fabrics, or handcraftsmanship, the digital realm of the luxury paradigm is based on foundations of community and experience. It's no longer just about expressing who you are and what you can afford, but actually which groups you belong to, and which groups and digital communities align with your values, what brands align with your values. And of course, it's about the individual, unique, tailor-made, and sometimes exclusive experience of interacting with the brand. Because at the current era of digital, consumers no longer just expect the interaction with brands to be transactional. They can always do that through e-commerce. They can always buy those products. The, let's say, axis of competition between digital brands is moving more and more towards the ability to provide those experiences to their customer, particularly and preferably ones that can be shared in a social setting, in the paradigm of essentially experience marketing. So moving onwards, I want to show you examples of kind of digital luxury paradigm being done right and digital luxury paradigm being done wrong in an outdated fashion. So here is a quick snapshot of what I believe also to be a German company, so very relevant for this event, Mytheresa, and showing the new paradigm of immersive luxury experience of interacting with their infrastructure and purchasing through the newly distributed to early adopters Apple Vision Pro headset. So as you see, this is all about experience and exclusive customizability of that experience to the customer rather than about ownership or any other aspect of glamour. This is very light, breezy, visually attractive, and really makes the user feel special, makes a memorable experience of interacting with Mytheresa, even if in the end of the day, it will come down to a commercial transaction of purchasing an item of clothing, maybe even a physical one. And this, I'm not going to maybe name the company because I'm not here to kind of downplay anybody's involvement, but this is maybe an example of not being done that right. This is an example of kind of another take on the virtual Apple Vision Apple Vision Pro headset, executed, I believe, with a price tag of something like $49,000, not only covered with 18-karat gold, but also covered with a gold blinder. So this is very much focused on the old paradigm of luxury, ownership, and feeling exclusive. What they haven't considered is, first of all, that something like that, still Apple Vision Pro is something that you are most likely to wear at home, less in the social setting, because it doesn't still allow for a good interaction with other people in your surroundings. So the ability for social proof is kind of limited here, but maybe even more so, they haven't considered the experience of the user. Currently, one of the biggest objections, everybody agrees that Apple Vision Pro is groundbreaking, and the spatial internet paradigm that it brings to the user will be the next wave of interaction, and how it changes will lead to new forms of content creation, new breed of influencers. But one big hurdle to its adoption is the weight and the strain that it puts on the neck of the users. So adding that 18-karat gold, flexy as it might be, it actually adds, I think, about 330 grams to a weight of something usually heavy. So basically, you would need super, super developed neck muscles to be able to pull something off like that. So again, old luxury paradigm, and also not considering the user experience component of something that is just essentially a blinked out version of something that is still in the early stages of the adoption. So moving forward, and it's no kind of mistake that I included a picture of Coco Chanel here. Coco Chanel in many ways was ahead of her time, and she needed to kind of overcome hurdles to adoption of what she was delivering to the market. She started off by designing hats. The hats were very different from what was kind of considered the norm in fashion at this time. And she also started introducing those costumes that are well known and kind of a staple, but back then were not really kind of associated with female fashion. and were kind of heavily associated with military uniforms and the aesthetics of those uniforms. But this enabled Coco Chanel to develop her unique brand, and why I think she's still such a great caliber and an example to follow for founders in the space alike. Not only she was a brand in her of herself, she understood the importance of storytelling, the importance of brand IP protection, but most of all, rather than just designer, she was a founder, a fully blooded founder that knew how to do deals, how to make business, and how to increase the value of her empire and think outside of the box and innovate in her industry. That's why the story of Coco Chanel, I highly recommend diving into her biography. Very interesting, even though full of storytelling and sometimes not being able to distinguish what is truth and what is myth. But enough about Coco. So challenges to mass adoption. We're going to run through those today. The challenges around the utility of digital wearables and digital luxury, interoperability of those assets and avatars, the business models around those, and maybe some common errors that we see early stage founders not consider early on in their journeys, to softer stuff like communication strategy around those, and finally, something more broader for the industry, zero-sum mentality in the lieu of a community-driven approach of growing the pie bigger for everybody involved. All right, so let's dive right in. Utility, what I mean by utility. So even the most beautiful asset and the most amazing wearable essentially has no value, even if it's just super aesthetic, if it does not have proper utility, ideally one that has a social context. So, of course, once we think back to the day of early computer gaming, as you were dressing up your character, I, for example, was playing Diablo when I was a kid, and I remember I could have wear items that maybe had less competitive value in the game, as long as they made my character look cool and felt aligned with my need for self-expression in that game. But beyond that, utility of assets in that new paradigm needs to also provide an access to a community, to a unique group of people, maybe to an environment that makes access to this digital wearable exclusive. Another one is participation. You need to be able to interact with that community. And in many ways, here you have the example of Louis Vuitton Via Trunk, something that not only started as a digital asset that gives you access to the community, that community has unique rights within the wider brand following, but then also converts to a physical asset. So we have access, we have active participation, and we have expression that kind of cuts both digital and physical realm, and finally provides a unique connection to the brand and also gives you the ability to flex your assets in a social setting. If you came out with this little trunk to your people or even showed it on social media, people know that you're this part of the unique VIA community. If I remember correctly, they were limited to 39 people, so that's a very small group that have a unique access to the brand and actually direct connection with the brand, and maybe even so influence on the direction the brand will be taking, depending on which strategy Louis Vuitton takes. So again, the most important utility for digital fashion is social utility. How I can show off that fashion, how I can show my friends that I express myself through this particular item, or that I own it, to get social proof from that, and have the audience that are spectators to my expression, rather than for that expression to happen in the vacuum. The next challenge, and one very close to my heart based on the topics we're working with Futureverse on, interoperability. So the first rule of the metaverse by Neil Stephenson, the author of the book Snow Crash, which originated the term metaverse, is that there is no many metaverses. There is the metaverse. It's one open environment that kind of combines all those digital spaces where users and their assets move freely between those spaces, even though each corners of that universe might look different, very similar to the vision of Oasis in the Ready Player One franchise. In order for this interoperability to take place, well, we need to solve the technical compatibility of those assets. So let's say I have something beautiful in Spatial or even in Fortnite, And me and my avatar want to move to Roblox. Is that possible? Is there a reliable access point, the bridge, the door that I can go through to kind of move between those worlds seamlessly as part of the open metaverse? Because otherwise, if my assets are so-called landlocked in one particular game or virtual environment, the moment the server carrying that virtual environment goes offline, all of the value of those assets disappears, and it can result in heavy financial loss. I think recently they've been winding down one of the Call of Duty servers, and the gamers were very upset that essentially the very valuable items they've been using suddenly have no value because they cannot escape that world that is now winding down and will no longer be compatible with other virtual environments provided to those gamers within the paradigm of that particular game that is Call of Duty. So the next kind of asterisk of the challenge of the compatibility is on the brand side. And again, using the example of Coco Chanel, the IP of your brand is the most precious asset that luxury brand has. And how do you protect that IP? How do you give control to the brand to make sure that they can maintain the right representation of their IP across virtual spaces? Who knows, maybe one designer that might love how their assets look in spatial, suddenly if they go to Minecraft or Roblox, something that has much more rough and pixelated aesthetics, they might say at this point, I don't believe that adequately represents my brand. If you're working with AI and that is touching and learning from visual assets of the brand, well, if you answer the question like what assets do you pull from, what images you pull from, and you say from the internet, how do you know these are licensed images? How do you know these are licensed design? How do you know you're not feeding your AI with essentially what is a counterfeit of brand aesthetics rather than IP protected aesthetics of the brand? Finally, something that is a non-technical challenge. So we have many actors, I mentioned some of them, and also the digital infrastructure that carries those platforms. Fortnite, Meta, Roblox, Sandbox, a lot of metaverse spatial. What is the financial reason? What is the economic reasons for those platforms to open up and guarantee the freedom of movement, much like we have in the Schengen zone? Currently, the economic incentives for them are not aligned. There might be worry about the drain of users or other types of drain of value, and no guarantee that this will actually be a win-win game for everybody. And as long as we don't solve that problem, even if we solve the technical challenges to interoperability, if we cannot align those incentives between actors that hold the infrastructure for those spaces, we can never expect the real interoperability. And finally, remember that the true interoperability of the open metaverse is not just about virtual reality. It starts at the data layer with some often decentralized computing, but it ends with something that I call the reality spectrum. So rather than virtual reality, imagine there is a whole spectrum from virtual reality to mixed reality to augmented reality to physical reality. And your assets, as long as you as the users and identity that you carry with you and the way you express that identity should be able to move freely between all of those kind of aspects of reality across what we call the reality spectrum. And this is the true interoperability that would greatly increase the value of digital fashion. Right now, we already use augmented reality through filters on our phones, but with the adoption of mixed reality, augmented reality, those headsets becoming lighter, becoming the battery life being extended, and us being able to use it in the outside world, that will truly bring the biggest wave of adoption to digital fashion and will increase the value of those assets, along with the ability to have the social proof of those assets. So business models, another challenge that we often see. So first of all, well, are you using technology with your business model? Is your business model product-based or is it services-based? If it's product-based, do you as a company have the in-house technical resources rather than rely on third-party software builders like software houses? Because if you do, well, it's great and it still can be a valuable business. And if it's services business, it can still be a valuable business, but it will not be a venture capital business if you do not own your own IP. And that brings us to the second point in the business model kind of section. If there is no product, that poses a limit to scalability. Why? Because if you're providing services, there is essentially so many hours in the day that you as the founders and your team can provide those services. And for venture capital size returns, we do need a product that works for founders even when they are asleep. Finally, is your business model addressed to the right client? And currently we see a lot of technology builders early in the space of digital fashion and luxury, chasing the highest value brands, the most visible luxury brands for the proof of content, proof of kind of validation, market validation, proof of concept. What they're not considering is, again, those brands need to protect their IP, the most valuable asset they have. So they're much more risk averse. They have more to lose. They're sometimes totally ignoring much younger brands that might have a much higher risk tolerance and need to adopt different technology paradigms in order to be seen and kind of get a competitive edge. Again, this axis of competition is very different for more established brands than for younger brands in the market. And here is an example of Gucci interacting with a very established provider of technology, infrastructure provider. There is Gucci Town in Roblox, and there is a sandbox replication of Gucci Cosmos real life experience, essentially experience of augmented reality and mixed reality that they presented in London. But still, a lot of companies would focus only on Gucci rather than focus on those infrastructure providers where there might be the real clients. And finally, something that people do not consider in their business models is the sales cycles. Those brands are huge, huge companies. It's not a handshake deal that puts you in the territory of a done deal. Actually, this is just the beginning, and celebrating that you made a deal with Louis Vuitton just because you shook hands with somebody from the team and they said your concept is interesting, unfortunately just shows that maybe you have limited experience with B2B sales and you do not understand how long the sales cycles and kind of the quality control process of those brands might take, and how in line it is with their budgeting rhythms throughout the year. And that might quickly make you run out of runway, while the sales you were projecting and the high hopes you had riding on your interactions with those luxury brands are actually dwindling as the time goes by. Finally, something much softer than those hard domains we were touching, communication. So I noticed that in the space, when we, for example, talk about the brand adoption of NFTs, everybody kind of hears what they want to hear and do not consider what different stakeholder groups might hear. People at the very top of those brands, people that run the financial groups like LVMH or Kering that work with those brands, when they hear NFT, this is just an example, they immediately think speculation in profile pics, speculation in crypto, kind of a lot of losses for people involved in the space, a lot of risks, maybe some scams, and they think, no, let's avoid that risk, let's stay away. The people in the space, digital fashion designers that are using NFT technology to create digital scarcity and kind of give their NFT the properties of a physical component, when they hear brands adopting NFTs, they think, of course, digital wearables, even though when the brand decision makers think of using NFTs, currently, they think mostly about loyalty and rewards to their brand community. So being mindful about your own interpretation and how other people might interpret what you're saying and the wider developments in the market is really important in the way you communicate across this industry. Another one is positioning. Are you a digital fashion brand? Or are you a digital fashion or digital luxury technology startup? If you're building a brand, the most important thing you're building is the story of your brand and the value of brand IP. If you're building a technology startup, the most important thing you're building is your technology product. If you're trying to position yourself as both at once, you might actually shoot yourself in the foot. And while venture capital investors will not consider you essentially a technology startup, the people in the fashion industry might not consider you a brand because to them you sound like a technology startup. So choose your pathway, and even though you might be using both components if you're in your journey, be very mindful of how you position yourself. And finally, spotlight timing. Because this whole area is so new and it's relatively small number of people in that space, it's quite easy to get into the spotlight and gain visibility. But remember that likes and press mentions do not pay the bills and do not pay the salaries of your team. And sometimes if you get the market spotlight on you too early, especially before you actually have a product, then you might actually waste your 5 minutes in the spotlight, and the market is very unforgiving that way. If they do not see you delivering while you're in the spotlight, you might just miss your chance. And we all know from human interactions, we only get one shot at that first impression. So the last challenge, kind of wider for market and for us to remember, is zero-sum mentality. Well, for those brands that are super established and are competing in the space, and definitely the most prominent example is kind of the conflict between LVMH and animosity, and between Louis Vuitton and Gucci as flagship brands of LVMH and Kering respectively. You might also want to Google the war between those two, kind of the attempt of Bernard Arnault to do a hostile takeover of Gucci, how François Pinault stepped in and made part of Kering to protect the brand from being taken over. It's a very interesting story. And definitely for those brands, that mentality is like either I win or they win, which is very cute to see that, I think, in the Vogue index of the most prominent brands. Louis Vuitton was first, Gucci was second. Both, the success of both was credited to the fact that they're embracing technology in a variety of ways and strategies. But that doesn't apply to us. That market that I just mentioned is at a very different stage. I would even say maybe at the fall stage of its glory, referring to seasons of the year, whereas we are very much at the spring stage. At this stage, it's not really about who wins and who gets the overall lion's share of the market and who captures the imagination of the audience. It's about growing the pie bigger for everybody, validating the tangible opportunity that this market brings for builders, brands, both established and new ones, and moving forward together, helping one another as community throughout those challenges of adoption that we're discussing today, to achieve shared growth and to get outside perception of something that is an unstoppable force led by a community of creative innovators that walk confidently on both the side and technology and design and digital beauty, visual beauty, rather than a bunch of speculators that are kind of racing each other within the zero-sum mentality. So with that in mind, we're almost at the end of our time together. So I just want to kind of throw some stuff your way and mention some opportunities that this creates for fashion brands. Well, all of those technology paradigms means rather than just design something for your brand audience, you can now bring your audience directly into the creation process, of course, within your parameters of control. So you still maintain the integrity of your IP, but you can source inspiration from your brand audience and kind of engage them, again, reinventing that brand experience. You can look into community tooling and how you define the part of being the digital community. What was executed great by Louis Vuitton is the Louis Vuitton's Via Trunk initiative. What maybe wasn't executed so great was their Discord server that essentially was a third-party platform. It wasn't clear how people are benefiting from this platform. Most of that platform was actually sealed off from the wider community and dedicated to Via Trunk holders, which kind of resulted in this moment rather than wow moment from the industry because they promoted the link to everybody. It was kind of a moment, which is not really what they were after. Data-based engagement, knowing more about your users without invading their privacy. Maybe also using Web3 paradigms to reinvent the customer relationship management, maybe integrating Web3 and wallet data, again, as a kind of privacy-safe paradigm of working with them. It's new means of content delivery. We also talked about this with Apple Vision Pro, new types of influencers, AI personalization of the customer journey, including the mid-funnel of the transaction. That's where most people drop off from the transaction. And finally, rewarding and maintaining the loyalty of your community. almost at the end of our time, opportunities it creates for builders. It's working on extending the utility of digital assets, working on the back end of that digital components that cut across the spectrum of reality. It's about user immersion and immersive experiences, working on mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality platforms, gamifying the experience, providing more infrastructure for the digital self, and finally, my favorite, working on ensuring the interoperability. So with that in mind, we reached the end of our time. I want to thank you for your attention and your time. It's been a great pleasure talking to you today. And I hope that kind of brings the technical aspect and a lot of the challenges and how we can solve them together closer to the concepts of digital fashion and digital luxury. So with that in mind, thank you for having me and enjoy the rest of the event. Have a good one.